we go for launch.
5.
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting. Anything can happen in the next half hour.
4.
My friend, we cannot keep this a secret any longer.
This whole thing is insane.
3.
Quiet, please. I am analyzing.
Where's the kaboom?
2.
There was supposed to be an earth-shattering kaboom.
1.
Greetings, my fellow galactic travelers, and welcome back to Planet 8. This is your mission commander Larry speaking to you from our hidden base. Chief Engineer Bob is here by my side as always in the command center, and circling Planet 8 in our orbital spy satellite is Reconnaissance Officer Karen. On this episode of Planet 8, we will be discussing the horror films of Hammer. Those of you who are not in the know, Universal had the famous monsters Dracula and Frankenstein and so on and so forth in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Hammer comes along and redoes some of those, if not all of those, classic monsters in color with a little bit more blood and gore. Speaking of blood and gore, we're very fortunate to have friend of the podcast, Lord Blood-Rah, horror host and also host of Lord Blood-Rah's Nerve-Wracking Theater, as well as independent filmmaker and creature feature archivist Tom Wyrsch. Gentlemen, welcome.
My lords and ladies, very happy to be here on Planet 8 again, looking at the vinyl topiary forest. It's a wonderful thing to be back here.
Yeah, no, it's great to be here and great subjects. Let's roll.
All right.
Yes.
Sounds good. Let's go ahead and get right into it. We're going to go round table. Favorite horror film from Hammer Pictures. Let's start with Tom.
Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed.
And why is that? What was it about that film that kind of...
It's actually the first one that I saw in a theater.
Oh.
It really made an impression on me because, I had seen some of the other ones were on television because they were made much earlier, in the late 50s.
Right.
But I hadn't seen any of the Hammer films in an actual theater, and it really left an impression.
Cool. And Lord Blood-Rah.
I've got to say it's between Curse of Frankenstein, which was just such a, as of that time, unique take on the whole Frankenstein story. It was much closer to the novel than the American Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Because it introduced us to the true monster who was Frankenstein, Victor Frankenstein. Peter Cushing's amazing performance in that film is just wonderful.
Agreed.
It's between that and I'm going to say Plague of the Zombies.
Ooh.
And almost for the same reason, because it had such an interesting take on zombies. It was the voodoo zombies, not the flesh-eating
Right. I was going to say.
We know today. But the way it incorporated that into this, if I'm remembering correctly, mining village?
I believe.
Somewhere in England, as I'm remembering. Great film and some chilling imagery in there. Really love that.
That's going deep. I forgot about that film.
It doesn't get the airplay that it deserves.
Yeah.
You don't see it very much.
Cool. Let's kick it up to the satellite. Karen.
Well, if we were going strictly on horror, then I think I would say The Mummy, because I really like Christopher Lee's portrayal of the mummy, because he has this very powerful mummy. I just like the way he just plowed through everything. I mean, he was like this unstoppable force.
It's true.
Very different from kind of the staggering mummy we got, especially in later the sequels in Universal. His mummy just seemed like everything Christopher Lee did, just kind of imposing and overpowering. And so I really enjoy that film. And of course, you've also got Peter Cushing in it, so you can't go wrong with that. But if we broaden the category a little bit more, probably my all-time favorite Hammer film is Quatermass and the Pit, or as we know it here in the U.S., 5 Million Years to Earth. to me, that is an outstanding film. Just there's so many different aspects to it. It's got the science fiction background, but there's a lot of aspects to it that I think are much more like a horror film, especially like when they're in the neighborhood, the Hobbs End neighborhood, and they talk about how you can see how these aliens that have been buried underground have been kind of psychically influencing people for generations and causing them to interpret it as like ghosts and sort of like hauntings and things like that. It's just a very atmospheric film, and I really, really enjoy that film a lot. And I think it's actually coming out on a Blu-ray from Scream Factory pretty soon. So we'll finally have a good version here in the U.S. to look at.
Have you seen the 6-part TV show that was based on, was exactly the same thing?
You know, I have seen a few clips online, but I haven't seen the whole thing, but I'd be interested in seeing that.
It's on Internet Archive. You can download it. I downloaded all 6, and it's exactly the same as the movie.
Really?
It's amazing, and it was made for television in the, I believe it was 50s. It came out in England.
That's something to check out.
Yeah, and it's really good.
I'll have to take some time and actually sit and watch the whole thing. Yeah.
And did not have Brian Dunleavy, right?
You're right. Don't believe so.
And let's kick it over to Chief Engineer Bob.
Yeah. Well, didn't the American distributor like sandwich Dunleavy in there? Made Hammer put him in there as
I think so. Yeah.
Well, I love werewolves. I love the Wolfman, all that. I gotta say, my favorite. I have 2 favorites. One favorite is definitely Curse of the Werewolf. I know we had Lord Blood-Rah on before, and we talked at length, I think, about Lon Chaney Jr. and his portrayal of Lawrence Stewart Talbot, and the way he played him and how he was so heart-wrenching, as not wanting to be a Wolfman and turning into Wolfman at night.
Right.
I think Oliver Reed does maybe not as good, but close to as good a job, as the tortured person that becomes a werewolf.
Oh, I agree.
And now, wasn't the premise as he was born on Christmas?
Yeah, it was.
And it was like such an affront to God that.
Well, the rape as well. I mean,
right.
it was the way he was conceived.
Yeah, because you had the serving wench.
Yeah.
And she would serve the one prisoner.
Right.
Well, she was mute too. She couldn't.
Yeah, she was mute.
So.
Yes.
And then when the person running the place basically made advances, and she rejected his advances, he threw her in the cage or in the jail with the hermit in there.
Yeah.
And he ends up raping her, and that's where Oliver Reed is born.
And he dies after that too.
Yeah.
It was all these weird things going on, and so the spirit of the werewolf entered into her womb or some kind of.
So he was born cursed.
He was born
It was
cursed.
going to happen.
Conception.
So all
to
you
birth.
listeners out there that have birthdays on Christmas, watch out.
No. We just.
Someday.
But no, and the makeup is excellent.
Oh, yeah.
One of my favorite werewolf makeups. Even though the makeup of the face itself was minimal, it was still
the build up. I mean, even the shoulders I noticed when
Right.
Now was that Oliver Reed playing the werewolf as well? Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah.
It was a great look.
He did a great job because he was a fairly big guy.
Yeah.
To begin with, so it wasn't that big a stretch for him to play,
That's true.
to play the Wolfman as well as himself.
Yeah.
But and I think that also kind of capped off Hammer's whole run of Dracula and Frankenstein and the Mummy, and then the Werewolf. Kind of whole run of the Universal remakes or reimaginings.
The only monster that did not have multiple sequels.
That's
True,
right.
yeah.
That's true.
There was only one werewolf movie.
Yeah.
Was there another
wonder
Mummy
why.
movie?
I don't know.
No, you're right. There was
there
no
was
other.
one Mummy. So.
No, wait a minute.
No, there was more than one.
Shroud of the Mummy.
Yeah.
Wasn't that it?
Yeah.
Okay.
There were a few Mummy movies.
Yeah, they did a couple of them.
Yeah. That's
But
right.
no more werewolf. I'm trying to think. How did he? I just watched this too. How did he die at the end of the movie?
But didn't he get shot and he fell out of the
That's right.
tower?
The silver bullet from the bell tower. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, no, that's
I have it right here
and
for
then
you.
there was another one that.
Go ahead, Tom.
On the Mummy,
Yeah, go ahead.
Curse of the Mummy's Tomb, the Mummy's Shroud, and Blood of the Mummy's Tomb were all Hammer.
Now, were one of those your second favorite?
I have to do some catching up. No, I was never really a mummy fan. Even the old Universal mummies. It was Mummy and Invisible Man. Those are kind of off to the side for me. I wasn't really into them. But I do have that whole Universal set, so I've got them by default. So, but no, I do like the original Christopher Lee Mummy for Hammer. But the other one is kind of offbeat. It's Lust for a Vampire.
Oh, yeah.
And starring Ute Stensgaard, who I had a big crush on growing up. and it's really funny because that would show on TV, syndicated as To Love a Vampire, and was edited so far down that you had no clue that once you saw Lust for a Vampire that look at all this stuff that's in this movie.
About 15 minutes.
that was not in this TV movie.
Right.
And that was the sequel basically to The Vampire Lovers.
Yes. Yeah.
And basically lesbian vampires. But
as we're talking about Hammer, I'm remembering all of these other great Hammer films.
Yeah.
Well,
How about the Abominable Snowman?
Yes, that was a good
one.
one.
That was a fabulous film.
Yeah.
And then the Gorgon. I mean, we have to mention that.
Gorgon, yeah.
That's right.
It's important that we mention that.
That's right. It's important to mention that. Yeah.
We'll get to that soon.
That's right.
That's right.
They did a great job on the Phantom of the Opera, I thought, too. They really did.
Their Phantom was
that Herbert Lom?
It was.
Yeah, okay.
It was, yeah. Of Inspector Clouseau fame.
Right, yeah. Has anybody seen... I'm sorry, did you say yours?
Real quickly?
Yeah,
No, that's fine.
Larry doesn't get any.
Larry doesn't get to see this.
Mine, obviously, Curse of the Werewolf, but The Brides of Dracula. It's a really cool vampire film without Christopher Lee. And I love Christopher Lee's Dracula portrayal as well.
Now, that was the only one he didn't play Dracula, right?
Exactly. Right. And what struck me was Peter Cushing does get bit.
That's right.
And he cures himself, which I don't think has ever been in any other vampire film where you cure yourself. He takes a hot iron,
red hot
burns the bite, and then throws holy water on it, and it disappears.
Right.
And pisses off the vampire. Right. And he goes after him, and Peter throws holy water on him and burns his face and all that stuff. But that just sticks out in my mind that he was able to cure himself of vampirism, Dr. Van Helsing.
Only time it happened.
Well, yeah, the thing that I was so impressed at growing up with the Hammer films was, they had the whole Gothic atmosphere.
Yeah.
Which we spoke about the Universal films earlier, that they were in their own sort of world with this kind of, village and backwards people, and then suddenly like Lawrence Talbot comes in and he's, a modern type person. He's obviously from back then, modern day,
Yeah,
but,
society.
But Hammer had the whole Gothic thing going on, which I think Bray Studios, they had all this land, and a lot of the land was used as the backgrounds and stuff.
See, I was going to ask
the
you.
forests and all that.
Yeah. Okay, so they did have like a back lot, if you will.
Yeah, they had a very small studio.
Right.
Tom's probably got the history there, but they had a very small studio called Bray Studios before Pinewood came around.
Okay, so this was pre-Pinewood.
Pinewood was like the huge, that's where Bond was all shot.
Right, Star Wars.
Yeah, Superman was shot there.
Right.
The original. And so, but Bray Studios was their first set of studios, and they had all this like farmland or whatever out there that they used for forests and the woods and everything in their films, and that kind of helped set the whole atmosphere. Plus, those films were really the first ones to show a lot of the sort of gore and blood and Frankenstein pulling organs and things like that. But,
or like eyeballs bubbling in a. Go ahead, Walker. I'm sorry.
Don't say anything.
I was just going to say that's why those films, when I was really young, made me uncomfortable, and I couldn't really watch Hammer until I got in my teens, basically, because Hammer was like blood and boobs. And you know, they'd be like people's brains being sloshed around in buckets on the floor and blood squirting out, and you know, of course,
all the
lots of
assistants are
cleavage
bending over and the
so,
boobs
you know,
come
I
out.
couldn't appreciate it until I was like 13, 14.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Wasn't there one of the Frankenstein movies where he actually drops a brain or a heart on the floor and accidentally kicks it around a little bit before
Yes.
he picks it up? I seem to remember that. I couldn't tell you which movie it was. So I seem to remember that scene.
You remember that, Karen?
Yes, I do, and I think they made fun of it in some. There was some like film where they were showing like a bunch of different like horror movies, scenes from them, and I remember them having that clip in there.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I don't recall. I'm going to have to look now and see.
Yeah.
Or if any of our listeners know the name of that film, put it up on Facebook
It's
or our
definitely,
page
it's definitely
and
in
let
the
us
dark
know.
recesses of my mind.
Right. But Bob, you brought up Lust for a Vampire.
Yeah.
That was kind of a mini cycle, part of a mini cycle within the Hammer horror films, the vampire films based on the Karnstein.
The Karnsteins,
family. Yeah, because the film I was going to mention was Captain Kronos, Vampire.
Right. Caroline Monroe.
Right, yeah, exactly, with Caroline Monroe, yeah. Now that was supposed to kick off a whole series of films, and it just unfortunately didn't work. Because he was supposed to face the Frankenstein monster. He was supposed to go after different. They were going to introduce.
He was sort of like the Van Helsing of.
Yeah, exactly.
Even though Peter Cushing was Van Helsing, Kronos was more the sort of modern Van Helsing that Universal envisioned, where he was going after all the monsters and things.
Of the
The precursor to Hugh
Hammer
Jackman.
horror world, yeah.
It's interesting because when I was growing up, I never had an opportunity to see any of these movies at a theater. It was all through Bob Wilkins' Creature Features.
Of course.
Right.
You know, that was how I saw most of my Godzilla and Dracula and, films. I wonder if there were any restrictions that they had showing that kind of, boobs and blood, as it were. Do you know, Tom, if Bob ever encountered that, or?
Well, yeah, I mean, Twins of Evil was the first one that they slipped through. But then when they showed it again, they covered it.
Oh, okay.
Well, tell the story of when they first showed it.
Yeah, I mean, basically what happened was that Bob Shaw decided, because he was the editor for the films that they showed on Creature Features, and of course they were running 16 millimeter prints in those days, and everything that was the show was taped, so they had to switch back and forth. And he just decided to leave the film the way it was, so that when they exposed the breast of the twins, it came on. And of course, everybody at home was like, "Oh my God, look!" They'd never seen this before on TV, and because it's broadcast TV in those days.
Yeah.
And so they got huge ratings. Everybody switched to 2 to see what was going on with this movie.
This was like late night, right?
Yeah.
Like 11:30, 12 o'clock.
Yeah, I think Twins of Evil was in there at the 9 o'clock slot still when he first showed it, because it was the early 70s, and Bob's show started at 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
And in his second year, well, maybe you're right, because they went to 2 movies, so maybe it was the second movie. So anyway, everybody switched to Channel 2, and the ratings went sky high.
Right.
So management the next day said, "Oh my God, this movie got unbelievable ratings, the best we've ever got. We got to show this thing again. We'll show. That's right. We got to show it in prime time."
Yeah.
And then he told them, he says, "Maybe you really want to see what's in this movie first." And he showed them, and it was like, "Oh my God, we showed this! I can't believe we showed this." But 2 being an independent station.
Yeah.
Could get away with that, and I think that they were told not to do it again. Right. They didn't get in trouble for doing it, but the next time they showed it, they covered it.
So funny.
It was a different world.
I was going to say pre-internet, so
right.
a friend
Creature
calling a
Features
friend.
was also the first show in the country. Here, Channel 2 is the first station in the country to air Night of the Living Dead uncut.
That's right. Yeah.
And so they used to get away with quite a bit.
Well, Night of the Living Dead was New Year's Day, 1972.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the first time it was ever shown in the Bay Area.
Because Bob used to say, when Kira Schoen, as the little girl, stabs her mother with the garden trowel.
Right.
he'd always say, count the stabs, and then you know if it's edited or not. You know, it should be like 13 stabs, I think.
Something like that.
Yeah.
He would say like there's like 150 stabs or something.
I think they cut it down to 5.
Yeah, they cut it down to 1 or 2.
Now, let me ask you guys.
But going back to Hammer.
Do you think it was on purpose, or maybe I'm just thinking, there was always the Bond girl. Did Hammer try to establish like the horror girl? Because I know there's a couple of actresses who did several of these movies.
Oh, yeah.
Well, like Veronica Carlson.
Like, right.
Carlson, right? Carolyn Monroe. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Veronica Carlson was listed in it was a horror, not Horror of Dracula. It was which Dracula film was she in? I know she was in Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed.
Right.
Taste the Blood of Dracula, I believe.
Yeah, I think you're right.
She was listed as Hammer's latest horror. Not horror, honey, but it was something equally almost as crass.
Yeah.
Well, she was really in Dracula has Risen from the Grave. Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed.
Right.
A Horror of Frankenstein and the Ghoul.
Oh, the Ghoul.
She was in the Ghoul.
Yeah.
But she was actually in Casino Royale in the beginning of her career as a tall, blonde, uncredited.
Right. Yeah. So they were definitely putting together this kind of stable of very attractive victims for their various monsters. Definitely. Yeah.
It seemed to work well for them for a number of years.
Yes, it did. Yeah. Speaking of,
I wonder why.
Veronica's going to be a guest at Creatures Con coming up this year, as a matter of fact.
Tell us a little about Creatures Con, because we were there last year and we had Lord Blood-Rah on before the show. Then Planet 8 was fortunate enough to be at the show. But if you gentlemen would talk a little, and we're going to give you more information towards the end of the podcast, but just give us a little background on what's going on this year.
Well, Creatures Con, this is our 9th year, and we're the Bay Area's classic horror convention. Tom and I looked around a few years ago and realized that in the Bay Area proper, you had comic book conventions, Star Trek conventions, everything else.
Sure.
Nothing dedicated to classic horror. And the convention really started out as a tribute to Bob Wilkins' Creature Features, Bob Wilkins and John Stanley's Creature Features. But we realized that in order to keep Creatures Con kind of growing, we would have to expand that out into the worlds of classic horror and science fiction and classic TV and horror hosts and things like that.
Right.
So, this year our event is coming up at the San Ramon Marriott, Sunday, July 7th. And we're very fortunate this year to have the West Coast premiere of a new Hammer horror style film called House of the Gorgon.
Oh, nice.
Kind of a callback to the original Hammer horror
Gorgon,
film.
yeah.
Made by this independent filmmaker named Josh Kennedy, who specializes in doing these kind of homages to classic horror, especially a few Hammer things that he's done in the past. But this is his latest film, and Veronica Carlson. The film actually stars Veronica Carlson,
Nice.
Carolyn Monroe, Martine Beswick,
Wow.
and Christopher Neame. And we're lucky enough to have Veronica Carlson as a guest there, along with the director. So we're going to do the West Coast premiere of the film.
There you
and
go.
do a Q&A with both of them after the West Coast premiere.
Awesome.
Yeah, and we've got other programming too. That's the Monster Movie Quiz, which is always a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, that's some of the most fun I ever have on stage, is doing the Monster Movie Quiz. That was something that was begun by Bob Wilkins back in '75, I think, for the Bob Wilkins
75,
Super Horror Show.
With John Stanley, based on John Stanley's book.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, and it's basically a cheesy game show that tests your knowledge of classic horror and science fiction. And I love
Who were the contestants last year?
Oh, last year was
Scott Moon, Miss Misery.
Yeah, Miss Misery, and
Tom Canvas from LA.
That's right.
Tom Canvas used to work for Forrest J. Ackerman.
Oh,
that's right. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he won.
Oh, did you?
That's right.
Imagine that.
That's right. Now, the first year we did it, one of the contestants was Johnny Legend, famous film archivist, and from Something Weird Video and everything like that.
Yeah.
It was no contest. He just blew everybody away. Took him a while to get there because, he was thinking about the answers a lot, but he just blew everybody.
See, that's the thing.
He knew what he was doing.
The KGO radio here last week had the guy who right now is kind of running the table on Jeopardy.
Oh.
And he was saying, all you people know the answers, but the key is you have to know the answers within 5 seconds.
Yes.
So same with the monster movie quiz. We all know the answers.
Yeah, that's it.
But can it, we're all getting old, so.
Oh, yeah.
Can we remember the answers and spit them out in 5 seconds or less?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well,
especially when you're being asked directly,
Right.
What was,
Yeah. I know it.
Well, it's a lot of fun because it's interactive with the audience, and the audience wins the prizes, not the contestants. So that makes it even more fun.
That's cool.
So it's not just the people up on the stage and you watch it. Everybody gets involved, and it's you've got scenes from the movies and multiple choice questions, and it just it's just a whole fun thing. It's not really per who's going to win this thing kind of thing. And
it's all about the journey.
And then our fun one is the we have a feature film that's hosted by multiple horror hosts on the screen.
Mega Chiller Theater.
And we never let people know what the movie's going to be until they get there.
Right.
So it's always a good movie. It's not some PD, something that's been shown a million times. We pick something that's pretty rare, and but it's hosted on screen by multiple horror hosts.
Nice.
And that works really well.
Yeah, Mega Chiller Theater's become one of our more popular segments that we do every year.
Sounds
And then
fun.
we've got like 65 vendors.
Yeah, 65 vendors. Yeah. Oh, and this year, every year we try to do a unique film presentation, like a documentary on something that's going pertinent to that year.
Yeah.
This year, believe it or not, talking about getting old, this is the 60th anniversary of Plan 9 from Outer Space.
Oh, wow.
The movie is 60 years old. So we're going to have a special mini documentary called The Shocking Facts about Plan 9 from Outer Space, which addresses some of the stories and legends that have come up about the film throughout the years. Some of them are true, some of them are false, and we're going to kind of explore that and talk about the making.
So all you Ed Wood fans,
I don't know if my heart can stand it.
That's right. Can your heart stand The Shocking Facts?
Go to your calendar on July 7th of this year and put a big CC.
That's right.
Creatures Con.
That's right. At the San Ramon Marriott.
And bring your heart medication.
Right, yes. CreaturesCon.com if you want more information on that, by the way.
Excellent.
CreaturesCon.com, yes.
All right.
Excellent.
So, speaking of creatures and that, so what were your guys' big influence? I mean, obviously there was something that influenced you to get into all this stuff. I mean, other than the horror hosts and things, but movie-wise, what was your big influence growing up?
Just into general horror?
Horror, monsters, science fiction.
Creature features, Bob Wilkins.
I mean, films though. What movies?
Oh, what specific movies?
Yeah.
For me, it was the Universal films. And again, seeing those on Creature Features, but it was seeing, I think the first horror film, quote unquote, that I ever saw, I believe, was Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. So that was that's a great introduction for a kid.
That is actually.
Oh, it is.
And then I was like, well, oh my God, the original Frankenstein's coming out on Creature Features next week. That's great. So I could see, where this started. The Wolfman and stuff like that. So it was definitely just being exposed to the films. I've always just from seeing them on TV, just fell in love with the entire genre from my first viewing. I think it was just something I've always been drawn to. What about you, Tom?
Yeah, I would say the Universal, because that's the thing that we saw the most. I mean, the television was full of the 50s sci-fi things, which were, kind of, all right, whatever. But there seemed to be a quality to the Universal that has stuck, I think, with all of us.
That's a good point.
And, the monsters, and they were so well done. And the music. I mean, you really learn the importance later on in life, which you don't know as a kid, of how the music affects you in different scenes of the film. So I would say that. And then I think the one that scared me the most, though, is a fun story. Is we lived up in Sonoma County, and born in San Francisco, but lived up in Sonoma County. But I went back when my brother was in college, and he took me to see 13 Ghosts.
Oh.
It was re-released. It was originally in '60. I think this was probably in '63 or '64. I was just a little kid, and he takes me to see this movie, and I got to tell you, I mean, nothing scared me worse than that.
Did you actually have the ghost viewers?
I did. I had the viewers, which you could see with either way. I mean, it was that was just a joke, but it was a scary movie for 10-year-old or whatever it was back in that day. I'll tell you. So.
Yeah, so you mentioned like the 50s movies and whatever, but I love those. The whole AIP package of I was a teenage werewolf, how to make a monster, conquer the world, all those were just, I love those, even Beast with a Million Eyes and Day the World Ended and... Those were great.
It's just, there's just such wild imagination to be found in this genre. And I include both horror and science fiction in it. There's a wild kind of creativity and kind of an abandon that you go at. That's why you talk about like some of the lesser budget stuff, and even below AIP, some of the schlock stuff. I love the attitude of, hey, we got $20. Let's make a monster movie and just go for it. I love that attitude. Like in the film Ed Wood, you got a poster. You got a script. Hell no, we got a poster.
Did those people really have $20?
Well, in the best case scenario.
That's what really amazed me, because Sam Arkoff would go to Paul Blaisdell and say, okay, we need this monster. We need like a Martian for Invasion of the Saucer Men.
Yes.
And we need it by Monday. Go home to your garage and make it for $150 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And he'd go, and he would of course make them to fit him, so he would have to then.
That's right.
He would double dip. He'd get money for actually playing the monster because he was the one that fit the costumes.
I'm in the middle of writing episodes for my 9th season, and I just finished writing my episode for Lord Blood-Rah's Nerve-Wracking Theater, by the way, is the show. Get that in. I just finished writing my episode for Frankenstein's daughter.
Oh, yeah.
You've seen that. And Harry Thomas, who was Ed Wood's makeup artist. And he also did Superman Meets the Mole Man.
Yeah.
Killers from Space. He did the ping pong ball.
Oh, nice.
He did the makeup for Frankenstein's daughter. And he was told, you're going to make a Frankenstein mask for a low-budget Frankenstein movie. It's like, okay. So he made it, goes to the set, delivers it, and the director looked at it and said, the monster is supposed to be a woman. And it's an obviously big-headed male thing. And he was like, we're going to shoot. What can you do? So Harry Thomas just put lipstick on it.
Lipstick and a wig.
No, not even a wig, because the head's bandaged.
That's right.
So just a little lipstick.
You can't put lipstick on a pig, but you can put it on a Frankenstein monster.
There you go.
Apparently so.
Well, let's kick it up to the satellite. Karen, so if you had to peg down, not necessarily starring, but actually being involved in trying to defeat one of the creatures in these Hammer horror, not the Universal. I think those creatures are easier to vanquish or deal with than the Hammer. Hammer was kind of faster, smarter.
Boobier.
What's that?
Nothing. Continue, please.
Which movie version of that monster would you think you can go after and defeat?
Do I have help, or am I just doing it by myself?
You got me and Bob.
Oh,
well, you might as well be by yourself.
It's easy. Which monster do I think I could go after?
Yeah, would it be the werewolf, the Hammer version of the werewolf, the Brides of Dracula, Dracula proper?
Certainly no Christopher Lee Dracula, because he's just too frightening.
He's a tough one. I agree with you on that.
But it seems like some of the versions, some of the Frankensteins were not, they're kind of messed up. They're half put together. So,
you're going
in more ways than one.
You're going after Kiwi Kingston, right?
Yeah. You know, the head was it was kind of looked loose. You know, maybe a good, you know, maybe me and Bob distract him, and then Larry comes up from behind with a shovel. So
there you go.
I think we might be able to do it. You know, I think we got a chance there, but certainly not that big hulking mummy. No way, we're all dead with that one. Just grab each of us by the throat, and then one of us would run away. So
that would be me.
You know, Dracula.
Now, I'm thinking we need to get a Super 8 camera together, and maybe we can put something together for next year's Creature Con, and they can, showcase our.
Well, they have this thing now called video.
What's that?
They have this thing now called video.
Oh, video,
Yeah.
video. Oh, okay.
Look at
Digital.
Now, I'm going to throw the same question over to Bob, and I'm going to put a caveat in Bob's answer. You go ahead and pick the film, but you cannot have the Dragon Mobile. Okay, and for those listeners who've been paying attention, we did have a dystopian future episode, and Bob created this Dragon Mobile that kind of vanquished.
But I was Dragon from one utopia. I'd have to go after one of the Karsteins. Frank?
One of the female Karsteins,
yes,
of course.
Yes.
Of course. I would go after Dracula.
Christopher Lee.
Yes, because as that series went on, they needed to find more and more creative ways to kill the vampire.
Yeah.
And by the time that series ended, there were more damn ways to kill Dracula. Other than, sunlight, stake through the heart. There were Hawthorne. In one of them, he dies getting tangled up in Hawthorne. In a hawthorn bush. He dies in a hawthorn bush. Well, one of them, he dies in running water.
You just put a stream in front of him.
That's right.
Right. So if you've got
push him in the river.
Yeah, if you've got like a swatch of hawthorn bushes, just bat at him till he gets into the running water and he's dead. By the end of the,
there you go.
Just get a hose.
Get a hose. Yeah, that's running water. That's running water. Hit him with a hose. Bad Dracula.
Spray bottle that we use for our puppy. Back, you demon from hell.
That's right. Yeah.
So they made 9.
Yeah.
Hammer made 9 Dracula films.
Was it with Christopher Lee?
Just total films that were Dracula.
Well, there was that one, Brides of Dracula, that was not Christopher Lee.
Hey, that would be a good film, Brides of Frankenstein. That would be interesting.
Brides of Dracula. Bride of Frankenstein.
Yeah, well. Tom, what movie would you go after the monster? What do you think it would be? Frankenstein, the Gorgon, what? What do you...
Oh, most easily defeatable.
Yeah.
Oh, God, most easily defeatable. Well, I guess if I had a giant cross, it would have to be Dracula.
There you go.
And a big gallon of holy water. You know what I found interesting is we mentioned earlier that they were kind of spin-offs of the Universal, but that doesn't mean they didn't run into problems with Universal, because there's a lot of copyright issues that were going on, which is some of the reasons why Universal International released a lot of the first Hammer films in this country to avoid the problems, because they were successful over in England, but when they got here it was like you're not bringing them into this country because
that's interesting.
Yeah,
because I know they had like the Frankenstein makeup was theirs, and so Hammer had to create their, which I thought was a lot more gruesome.
Yes, absolutely.
And it worked in their favor, but they only used that makeup one time, right?
And it also had to do with the storylines too, because some of the storylines were following some of the Universal storylines, and so they had to be careful with that. They had to change their stories so it didn't fall in. Like one of them was very close to the son of Frankenstein, and they were making, and Universal jumped right on that. So they had problems making them because of Universal Studios.
And I know, especially with the look that in Evil of Frankenstein was actually a Universal Hammer co-production. And that's where you got the Kiwi Kingston flathead look, because they were trying to go for something that looked like...
So they were able to then do that flathead
only because they worked with Universal Studios. So Universal said, okay, we won't go after you for copyright infringement.
Because I think the gray area was that Universal couldn't copyright Frankenstein.
Right.
but they were able to copyright the look
The
of
makeup,
their
right?
Frankenstein. The makeup and the heavy boots and the suit and all that.
And when Horror of Dracula was, I mean, the film we know is Horror of Dracula, I believe in England was just released as Dracula.
That's right.
Right?
Exactly right.
When it came here, it was called Horror of Dracula.
Because that's another thing, because Dracula was a historical figure. So they can't copyright Dracula.
A literary figure.
Right.
Literary, yeah.
Well, like the name, they can't claim Dracula.
Right.
So anyone can make a Dracula movie.
Right.
But if they start making the Dracula look like Bela Lugosi or whatever, then that's where they kind of get in trouble.
Yeah, well, that's literary and historical.
They copyright Wolfman, but they can't copyright Werewolf.
Right, right.
So you can do a werewolf movie all you want, you just
Right.
can't call it Wolfman.
Right.
So.
Yeah, a lot of British films, or even vice versa, were changed. The titles were changed. Like Curse of the Demon was Night of the Demon in England, so they that was common for them to do that.
Yeah.
Well, even the Mummy, right? Because mummies are actual historical figures. You can't copyright the name Mummy, but
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Can you copyright creature features?
You better not try.
Leave that one alone. Karen, let me ask you this. So at our Universal discussion, we had Lord Blood-Rah here. We talked about the actors who portrayed Universal monsters. The Wolfman, Dracula, Frankenstein. With Christopher Lee on the Hammer side, how many monsters do you recall? How many different monsters he played?
Well, he played Dracula. He played the Mummy. He played a version of Frankenstein. So he kind of, and they only had one Wolfman. So
yeah, he never got to play the Wolfman.
Yeah, he kind of covered the main ones.
And he was in the Horror Express as well. And was that like a Van Helsing?
That is not a Hammer film.
That's not Hammer.
Oh, that's not Hammer.
It's not Hammer. No.
Oh, but it had.
It was
But it was Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing.
Peter Cushing. Okay,
we just ran that Thursday night on Creature Features. So what do you want to know about Horror Express? No, he played actually he was a scientist or expedition
archaeologist.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. What company put that out? Because it was Hammer-esque.
Isn't it a French?
Yeah, it's Italian,
Really?
French. I mean, they actually did not record any of the sound during the film. That they dubbed it all afterwards.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah, and it had Telly Savalas in it.
Well, that's what the Jackie Chan movies do.
They don't record any sound when they...
No, because Jackie Chan, his movies are distributed worldwide.
Yeah.
So they just, they're talking, they just don't record the dialogue. And then they go in after and dub it in Chinese, Mandarin, English, French, Spanish, German, whatever.
A lot of people think that's a Hammer film. You're absolutely right. I mean, they always, because Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing.
Exactly. That's what I thought. It's like interesting.
Talking about Christopher Lee, I think one of the best roles, and I hadn't seen this film until, I don't know, somewhere between 5 and 6, 7 years ago, is a movie called The Devil Rides Out.
Yes.
Also, I think over here it was called The Devil's Bride. I can tell Lord Blood-Rah knows what I'm talking about. But
his head is nodding.
The rest of us are like, huh?
but it's a very different role for Lee because he's actually the hero in this movie. He's this nobleman, and he's trying to save a friend who gets sucked into this satanic cult. And there's a lot of mysticism and all kinds of spooky stuff going on. But he's a very good heroic figure in the film. It was a really interesting change to see him, because in the Dracula movies, and I think it probably what I've read is that after a while he became kind of fed up and he just didn't have any dialogue. He was like, this dialogue is terrible, and so he didn't talk, and he just becomes this kind of imposing figure who's standing around. But in this film, he's kind of the center of attention, and he is this almost like a Van Helsing, but a little bit different. But yeah, he's a really good heroic figure in it. And anyway, if you get a chance to see The Devil Rides Out, they sometimes show it on TMC. So I would recommend that.
Well, I am going to check it out.
Well, that's the thing about Hammer. They just got totally lucky that they lucked on to Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee at an early point, and they were like the anchors for a lot of their movies. And you think about Christopher Lee, he was Dracula, all these monsters we were talking about in the Hammer films. He was a Bond villain. He was in Star Wars. He was in Lord of the Rings. He's like one of the main cinematic villains of all time.
He won World War II single-handed.
and he was a mainstay of those Hammer films in his early days. And it's the same with Peter Cushing, a very well-respected actor.
He was even in Airport 77.
He was. You could say that Christopher Lee cut his teeth on the Hammer films.
Dun, dun, dun.
It was kind of interesting with one of the interviews he did with Wilkins, where he was talking about The Mummy and how beat up he was making that film. I mean,
really?
He really went through a lot of pain and agony.
In a shoulder.
Yeah, there's many. Going down into the swamp.
Start the movie coming out of the swamp, coming out of the water.
He had a brutal time making that movie.
Bulldozing through all those walls and furniture, I guess, took its toll.
The scene where he breaks into a room through a door. The door was not breakaway. It was supposed to be.
He really got beat up making that film.
Yeah. Let me ask you guys this: have you guys watched Penny Dreadful?
Oh, yes.
No?
Yes.
I've started getting into it. I have maybe like 4 or 5 episodes in.
In my opinion, Hammer really had more of a influence on that Penny Dreadful series than the Universal, and it worked so well. Even though it's not a contemporary story, it's still taking place in Victorian era England. Right. It worked so well.
It's kind of a melding of the two, because they do callbacks to the classic films of the monsters.
Because in this day and age, there is no, in my opinion, there is no version of Dracula or Frankenstein that's been put on screen, either cable or the movies, that kind of had the gravitas that Hammer had for its time. And now Penny Dreadful comes to mind, and that's why I brought it up. I thought Penny Dreadful kind of paid an homage to those films, but also took it in another direction. Yeah. No one else has really done that. Do you guys, can you think of any?
I was a big fan of, and still champion, the Wolfman movie with Benicio
yes,
del Toro.
I
loved that movie. It was good. Today I don't understand why.
The sequel was as good too.
What?
Sequel.
It didn't star him. It went straight to cable, but it was as good as the first movie.
There was a sequel to that?
There was a sequel.
You're kidding.
I will look it up.
Was it Wolfman 2, or was it some other?
It was kind of like The Curse of something or other, but it had no real big star names in it. But the makeup and the CGI and everything was from the first film.
Oh, please do. I
will.
I've never heard of that.
I will.
That's great. But I loved that movie.
Knowledge.
I will say that the director's cut that is on the Blu-ray release is better than the theatrical.
Okay.
It is better. It fleshes out Talbot's character a bit more, and the character of the father, who Anthony Hopkins plays.
Yeah.
So it's better, but still.
Yeah. I want to say I have the DVD. I don't think I have the Blu-ray of it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, one area about the Hammer films I find interesting was that in the late 50s to the early 60s, the British were shooting their films in the same aspect ratio that our TVs are now. Americans were shooting them much wider.
Right.
So when you buy the DVDs or the Blu-ray, they're really showing you the original aspect ratio, which is like our 16 by 9 TVs. So you're seeing the whole thing. So a lot of times people think that, it's an older film, so they, are over-framing it or something like that. But no, not true. They're, all of them, like Abominable Snowman in the Himalayas and Horror of Dracula and that, they were shot in that frame ratio. So
Tom, was it a cost saving or was it?
No, it's just, they decided that they wanted to shoot it at that frame ratio, where the Americans were going for a much wider one, which was like 235:1, which is what we see nowadays in theaters. We were going much wider, and the British were they went wide from the 4:3, the old television size, to that frame ratio, and that's what they were showing in their theaters.
Because I want to say one of the DVDs I was watching, maybe it was Curse of the Werewolf, was boxy. It wasn't the full screen. I could be wrong, but it was one of the movies that I was watching. I thought, well, that's kind of weird, but, you know.
Well, it really depends. If you had an older DVD, it might have been like a 4:3 that was letterboxed.
Oh,
and then you get that kind of postage stamp.
Yeah,
it could be. Yeah.
The first DVDs that came out, they were doing the letterbox. Right.
Because you have to look on the back for anamorphic, you know.
You just hit that little zoom button on your
There
controller.
you go.
And it gets all like pixelated and not as sharp.
So I had kind of a brain glitch. Was the first Men in the Moon Hammer?
No.
It was
No.
not.
No.
1 million years
was
BC
British.
was Hammer.
Yeah, 1 million.
1 million, yeah.
Yes.
I think that's the only time Ray Harryhausen worked with Hammer.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're right.
Okay, that's okay.
And Raquel Welch.
Well, yeah. I think he was getting more into Harryhausen, though. With
Oh,
that
yeah.
train of thought. But
Yeah. Okay.
Who knows?
But it did have that kind of Hammer feel with the Victorian age
Yeah.
and that. But I think that was because it was based on a Jules Verne story.
Right.
And they, went to that era.
Right. Yeah.
But
All right. Well, we're coming towards the end of this podcast. I'm going to do a roundtable real quick before we turn it over to Tom and Lord Blood-Rah to tell us more about Creatures Con. Any last thoughts, comments, questions? Karen?
Just a follow-up, you were talking about Hammer's influence on modern
Yes.
horror. And I just want to throw out the idea that I think that Hammer had a lot of influence on Marvel comics, Marvel horror comics in the 70s.
Good point.
I've been going back and rereading a lot of horror comics, Werewolf by Night and Tomb of Dracula. And even though they pay some homage to the Universal films, I think, a lot of the settings and the artwork really takes me back to Hammer films more than the Universal films. So and since they're so close to that time era, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the artists and writers of that time were catching those films probably in the theaters, and whether consciously or not, bringing a lot of those Hammer elements into the comics at that time.
Like the depiction of the characters and monsters as well, would you say?
Yeah, I think that, and especially the little villages and the situations, a lot of the things that were going on with the monsters, the stories, everything. There was a definite Hammer feel. And if you looked at the black and white magazines, which were a lot more risque than the comics, I think you feel a definite Hammer influence.
Chief Engineer Bob.
Well, yeah, I mean, I grew up with these films, and they were always stuck out as sort of the class of horror, above and beyond everything else. And if you really want to delve deep into the history of Hammer, there's a great, it's almost like 2.5-hour documentary on Netflix right now, all on the history of Hammer and the films, and it covers all the different aspects. And
I think
it really
it's on Amazon too.
What's that?
I think it's on Amazon too, the documentary.
Was it Amazon Prime or was it?
Hammer House of Horror is the one that I saw, and it was like 2 hours 45 minutes.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Or something, but it talked about Beaker Street and the offices and So
okay,
Bob's
so
right.
it's Amazon Prime then.
Yeah,
I have both. It's one of them, but no, I watched it the other night. It's really a really good documentary. It gets really in depth on.
And it doesn't Peter Cushing and
Peter
Christopher
Cushing
Lee
and
narrate?
Christopher Lee narrate it.
Yeah.
So it was obviously made a few years ago.
Yeah, it is really good.
A lot of really cool behind the scenes, and also shows like Bray Studios and everything. And
Let me ask you guys real quick. So we talked about the Lord Blood-Rah brought up one of the films that he liked was the zombie, but it was the voodoo zombie, not the zombie. Yeah. Did Hammer ever do a modern take on zombies where the flesh-eating,
Not that I remember.
No.
I think Hammer was pretty much winding down by the time
when that came out.
Genre started.
Yeah. One of these days we need to do a podcast on ghouls versus zombies, because at one point in time, a zombie, like in White Zombie, there were these like automatons that swept your floor and did your grocery shopping, and then well, they
were the Haitian voodoo zombies with the voodoo drums. And,
Until 1968, until George Romero.
But then again, now they're dead. They never called them zombies.
Right, they were ghouls.
They were ghouls, right? So,
well, one of the big things that I don't think we mentioned about the Hammer films was their use of color.
Yeah.
And that's why the theater was so important, because you got to remember during the 60s when these things were on television, we were seeing them in black and white. Not too many people had color TVs.
That's a great
That's
point.
why Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed had such a big impact on me, because I saw it in the theater, and here it's widescreen color, and I'm used to seeing Hammer's films on a black and white TV, and
That's a great
small
point.
frame, so it's like the color that you see in those films is fabulous.
Well, that's why we do Bay Area film events, because a lot of these movies, you can see them on TV, you can watch them on the nicest home video system home theater system that you can find, but there's nothing that compares to seeing it on the big screen with a big audience of like-minded people.
Absolutely.
And just the whole experience of seeing it.
It was like seeing it for the first time.
Oh yeah, a lot of those movies, it's like you're used to seeing them a certain way on TV, and then you go and see them on the big screen. It's like,
oh, it's amazing.
Wow, this is like a real movie now. It's like
And that was important what Tom just brought up, because Curse of Frankenstein came out in 1957. Up till then, you did not have, let alone any really color monster movies happening around that time, but nothing big budget or treating the horror genre seriously. It was primarily in the United States, it was science fiction. I mean, you had the Teenage Frankenstein, it was Teenage Werewolf, came out around that
Teenage Frankenstein had a little bit of color in it.
A tiny little bit, yeah. But
at the very end, he gets electrocuted and it turns to color.
Yeah.
But
so you didn't have these big, lavish, beautiful color images of these films until Hammer brought them over to the United States.
Yeah, I think that's true for everything, because that was part of the theater experience that younger generation doesn't have now. Is we went to the theater and it was like, oh my God, it's widescreen, it's color, because all we saw before that was TV, black and white.
Well, to sound every minute of 55 years old, I cannot understand how anybody can watch a movie on an iPhone.
There's no way.
Do that.
It's widescreen color.
Don't understand. I just
high
don't
def.
get that.
Well, the thing is, it's like, when you were growing up, it's like you always wanted bigger TVs, bigger movie screens. You wanted to see it on the big theater.
Bigger girlfriend.
And, wait.
There's something going on with you today.
But now, it seems like everybody wants smaller, and I want to be by myself. I want to sit in this little corner with my small screen and watch this movie and block everybody out. Whereas, like I say, it's much better to experience on a big screen with a crowd of people. And this is, I'm not talking about Avengers Endgame or something.
Right.
Because you'll have people on their cell phones and people talking and whatever, kicking the back of your seats. But on these other films, when you go to see the older films in the theaters and the fans are coming out, they're much more respectful of the films. And they'll sit there and, and they're all so into this as much as you are, or maybe more, that it's an entire different experience than being in your little cube with your phone. And
you have not seen the original King Kong until you've seen it on a big screen. You could have seen it 1,000 times on TV. You haven't seen that film.
I had seen it on a big screen, and then suddenly they showed it at the Paramount Theater in Oakland.
I was there. Yeah, that's where I saw it.
And you just blew you right out of your seat.
Oh yeah.
Well, this concludes the Grandpas and Old Farts podcast.
In our day, we went to theaters and we
whippersnappers,
and we enjoyed it.
Put that phone away. No, I agree. There was a documentary about pinball machines, and they made a good point in that at some point in time, things changed. What we would do is we would go outside for our entertainment, whether it was bowling or the drive-in or whatever,
or an arcade,
and we would eat at home. And then there was this thing called a TV dinner.
Yep.
And it drove people from the home so that they would get dinner out of the home. And this thing called a video game, Pong, brought entertainment into the home, and things kind of switched. And it's funny because unless it's an event movie like Endgame, year after year you hear about the decline in movie sales and the decline in this, and yet video games, which are like $40 a game now, are making more money than these Hollywood films, and they're like, Pac-Man 3 or whatever the video game is.
Now you're showing your age.
I don't get it. I know.
Yeah, I was going to say,
So
Grandpa,
back
there's
to
no
the old-
Pac-Man, Grandpa.
Pong 4 is out now.
Well, it'd be Pong 44, I think, but anyway.
But yeah, no, that's true. That is absolutely
It didn't about face. Hey, guys, we had a fantastic time having you on the show.
Thank you so
We
much.
look forward to hopefully getting you down. I know you're going to be busy at Creatures Con, but coming in and recording with us for a couple of 10 minutes or whatever.
Oh, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, absolutely.
Let me ask you this. We didn't cover this in the beginning. If you could both give us... how can folks find you? Web pages, so forth.
Where can they buy tickets to Creatures Con?
And where can they buy tickets to Creatures Con? Because I know Tom has a lot of projects that he's working on right now. Lord Blood-Rah has a show, so please share that information with our viewers.
Real simple. You go to creaturescon.com.
Okay.
And everything is there. The only thing we don't have up yet is the complete programming, but we'll get that up soon, what the programming will be. But you can buy tickets there and see all the guests are going to be there, and the vendors and everything is on.
You guys have great guest lists this year. I mean, last year was good. This year's really, really good.
It's very cool. And something that I've really noticed going to other conventions as well, other than Creatures Con, is we have a very unique gathering of vendors. You're going to find stuff at our convention that you don't really see, especially at Bay Area specific conventions, because there aren't a lot of horror specific.
True.
We are the classic horror convention for the Bay Area, and a couple of the vendors said to me, "Well, I have to go down south, up north, out of state to sell my stuff because the stuff that they do, which is horror and science fiction specific, doesn't sell necessarily that well at comic book conventions or just general pop culture conventions."
It's very true.
When you've got a concentrated classic horror crowd, that's what they're looking for, and you're going to find incredibly unique stuff.
Bob made a steal last year at the show with those Hamilton monsters. He got all five? Four?
Nice.
For like a song and a dance, and I'm like,
that was like $25 or something.
Damn, I wish I would have found that.
That's it.
So
from our friend Streffen Taylor.
Very good.
Well, important too is that it's $15 admission, which is not much more than a theater ticket, and you've got 10 hours of tons of things to do.
There are so many vendors there. I even got a really good deal on an airbrush there.
Oh yes, that's right. Yeah,
cool.
From the art. Yeah.
So that was cool. Yeah. And there will be this little table called Planet 8.
Yes,
there will.
And hopefully, Karen will be there along with myself and Larry, and we'll be doing a lot of Planet 8 activities right there at Creatures Con.
That's right.
We've got unique vendors, special guests, live and film programs you're not going to see anywhere else. Like we mentioned, the Monster Movie Quiz, Mega Chiller Theater, the short documentary on Plan 9 from Outer Space, which the only place you're going to be able to see it is here. That's what we try to do. We try to do exclusive film content for the conventions.
And now you guys are going to offer incentives for people to buy tickets ahead of time, correct?
We are. Yeah, we're going to come up with some pretty special incentives for people to buy tickets.
That's right.
Yep.
As we'll be announcing that shortly.
Now, if they don't buy tickets, there will be tickets at the door, but there's probably going to be, you're going to have to wait in a line, and you're going to have to...
Exactly. Yeah. It's always better to pre-buy. It's always better to pre-buy your tickets. Just make absolutely sure that you're going to be able to get it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just a PayPal receipt. Right? That's all you need.
Right. What was that, Karen?
It's July 7th, right?
July 7th at the San Ramon Marriott. Yes, Sunday, July 7th.
Because this thing gets bigger every year, so it's going to come to a point where you're going to have to pre-buy tickets or take the chance that they'll be sold out by the time
it's always a smart thing to do. I mean, being July, you don't want to stand outside. You get your pass, you get in. You're going to have some kind of swag set up for them. Yep. It just makes sense. I mean... let me ask you guys this now. Cosplay. We didn't really talk too much about cosplay at the convention. I know last year I saw a ton of cosplay.
Yeah.
You guys encourage guests?
We do. Absolutely. Cosplayers are welcome.
There was an amazing alien walking around last year.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely, and a couple of folks from Planet of the Apes.
I saw some ape warriors out there.
Caesar, Caesar from the new Planet of the Apes films was there. We definitely welcome cosplayers. It just adds to the whole ambiance of the convention.
Cool.
Yeah.
And so, Lord Blood-Rah, your web information. People want to catch episodes or information on your coming season. Where can they find you?
Absolutely. The show is Lord Blood-Rah's Nerve-Wracking Theater, in which I host the best, worst, and wildest horror and science fiction films ever made. And if you go to lordblood-rah.com, that's LordBlood-Rah, H for the hell of it. LordBlood-Rah.com, you can check the TV schedules and see where you can find it in your area. It streams, it's on broadcast TV. As a matter of fact, I just picked up a new Roku streaming service. Cablecast Screenweave now runs the Chabot TV feed.
Good. Okay.
And not only that, so you can catch the show there Friday nights at 10:30 p.m. on Roku on that service. But they also have episodes of my series Video on Demand there.
Nice.
Now, and that's just brand new.
And isn't Lord Blood-Rah hosting all the programming at CreaturesCon, I think?
Well, no. Lord Blood-Rah is hosting most of the...
Oh, okay.
Hosting
we
most of the
we have a special host there?
We have a special horror journalist who writes for Scream Magazine, Kevin Nicholson.
Okay.
Who's going to be hosting one of the special panels there.
Great.
And we contacted him. He's an incredibly knowledgeable guy.
Great.
I mean, I was talking to him at one of the conventions. We immediately fell into... what were we talking about? We immediately started talking about Ed Wood. And it was like, okay, if you can 10 minutes of conversation, bring up an Ed Wood reference.
Yeah.
I host most of the things there. Of course, I host the Monster Movie Quiz, and it's some of the most fun I ever I have on stage. I love doing it.
I missed it last year, so I'm going to see if I can get permission from the chief to go.
Yeah, run over there.
I was podcasting. I couldn't get away.
One of my biggest jobs is keeping Lord Blood-Rah in line.
It is.
Well, and look, if you guys make it to the show, make sure, like I said, Tom and Lord Blood-Rah are going to be real busy, but check them out. They're going to have tables there with DVDs and all kinds of good stuff.
Oh yeah.
Any last minute words before we sign off?
No, I think that great show. I love talking about Hammer, so you guys do a great job.
Thank you, sir.
Get out there and see those Hammer films, especially on that nice color TV that we have.
Well, you never know. Bay Area Film Events, we may do a big Hammer show someday.
No iPhone watching.
That would be wonderful because again, you don't see those on the big screen. And
I'll have to look into it. From what I hear, the Hammer films are really expensive to get.
Are they?
But
that's a shame.
That hasn't stopped us before in some shows. So.
Well, Bob has a big couch. Maybe we'll do a personal showing here for you guys.
There you go.
There you go.
That works. Right. If you haven't seen the Hammer horror films, track them down and see them. They lessen in quality as they get into the stuff from the early 70s, I would say. But man, just what a lineup of classic content, classic horror films, and Peter Cushing's Victor Frankenstein and Christopher Lee's Dracula.
A lot of fun.
What do you want? And we totally forgot to mention Peter Cushing's Van Helsing, who was another. So he played two iconic characters,
right?
In all of in these films.
It was Van Helsing that cured himself of the vampire.
That's what you mentioned.
We did talk about Van Helsing before, but they definitely got quite a few classic characters in there.
Well,
yes.
Look, again, thank you guys. We'd love to have you back in the future, we will be reaching out to you. On that note, this will conclude this transmission from Planet 8. We would like to thank all of our intergalactic audience for listening. Be sure to head on over to our website at www.planet8podcast.blogspot.com, where you can get more information on this episode's topic.
For more conversation, find us on Twitter at Planet8Cast.
Or on Facebook at facebook.com/Planet8Podcast.
We want to thank you guys for tuning in each and every episode. We look forward to your input and opinions. Until next time, this is Planet 8 signing off. End transmission.
By George, he's got it. It is the end.